Our biggest blind spot, without any doubt, is our blind spot regarding who we take ourselves to be, or with regard to this construct that we call the self or my identity. This is an absolutely tremendous blind spot because we never come anywhere close to. It's not that we never come anywhere close to looking at it, but that we never come anywhere close to being aware that there's any kind of an issue there to look at even. Absolutely no idea. We have absolutely no idea that this is a question. That this question of am I the self that I take myself to be, or am I this identity that I understand myself as being and assert myself as being? Is it really anything to do at all with who I actually am? Now we all know that this doesn't come up. Obviously it doesn't come up. No one ever talks about it. It's not something that's ever mentioned in courses that we might take, or when we're at school. If we do a course in philosophy, classical or ancient philosophy, it will come up. But not in any kind of a way that would actually mean anything to us, I don't think. Because then if I'm studying classic philosophy or ancient Greek philosophy, it's just a subject I'm studying. It's got nothing to do with anything else. It's just a box that I'm ticking, really. And so that I'm able to study it without ever truly taking on board what I'm studying. So the thing that I'm coming around to talking about here is this whole notion of who we understand ourselves to be as being an actual real thing that we should take seriously and do our very best to nurture and sustain and propagate and perpetuate from day to day. So that's our everyday task. That's our number one task, is the nurturing and the propagation of the mind's idea of who we are. Once you reach a certain stage in life, this task devolves upon us, and then we devote ourselves to it. We have this thing that we call self-development, or self-improvement after all. And we also have this thing that we call education or learning. And education or learning is all something that's done by this idea that we have of ourselves in order to further itself, to increase its capacities, to make it a more worthwhile thing, even though we don't see it as a thing. We see it as a true expression of, I see it as a true expression of who I am. Now, this really is such a key point when it comes to understanding anxiety and depression and the neurotic conditions, the mental health conditions. Just earlier today, I was looking at this YouTube, and The YouTube was about someone's struggle with performance anxiety, self-doubt, and imposter syndrome. Now, I never really looked very much into it. What I found interesting was the fact it could have been a very good thing. I don't know, I didn't look into it, but what I found interesting is the fact that we so seriously talk about our struggle with things like this: performance anxiety, self-doubt, and imposter syndrome. Because in our struggle with this type of suffering, we do, of course, jump to an enormous conclusion, and we jump to it very, very fast. And that is the way we jump into conclusions. We don't have any notion whatsoever that we are jumping to a conclusion. So, with imposter syndrome, which is recognized as being a thing that people have, it doesn't occur to us that maybe the imposter syndrome, the sense that we have that constitutes imposter syndrome, maybe it's true. Maybe I am an imposter. Maybe I've been an imposter my whole life, and every now and again it dawns on me. Or maybe it dawns on me quite a lot. I'm actually an imposter here. Maybe someone will find me out. Maybe I'll be caught out masquerading as this person that I'm not. Naturally, this is an uncomfortable awareness. It constitutes suffering. It can constitute quite acute suffering if it's intense enough. But then why do we never think maybe this is true? Maybe I am an imposter. If it was true, the whole notion of struggling against this awareness wouldn't arise. What the hell am I doing struggling against an awareness if that awareness is true? Now, I can guarantee you no one ever goes down that road. Well, maybe they do, but collectively speaking, we don't. I have yet to see a YouTube video entitled "How I Was Going to Struggle with Imposter Syndrome Only to Realize that I Am an Imposter After All, so I stopped struggling with the so-called syndrome and woke up to the fact that I am an imposter." And where does that lead? So we assume that leads to a bad place. I can't be whatever it is I'm pretending to be. So all my dreams are crushed, all my hopes are crushed. I can't continue in my chosen profession or career, or whatever it is, my chosen role. But of course, it doesn't have to be a bad thing. If that way of life or chosen role or persona isn't who I am, then definitely nothing good could have come from sticking with it and pursuing with it and actually believing in it, that yes, this is true, this is who I am. Absolutely. There's nothing's good that's going to come out of that. That's a disaster. And yet, for all of us, or most of us who don't suffer from imposter syndrome, that could be the situation. It could be that we're imposters, but we haven't got that little bit of consciousness. Consciousness being that thing that tells us the truth about our situation. So here am I, a total imposter, and I haven't a clue I'm an And so I carry on, day after day, year after year, decade after decade, and carrying on with this charade. And maybe I do get some insight after a long, long time. Or maybe it's not an intellectual insight, but maybe I get to know about it in some kind of a way. That's definitely not an easy awareness to deal with. Because not only is it the case, oh, I'm pretending to be something that I'm not. It's, I've pretended my whole life to be something that I'm not, and I've never been true to myself, or I've never been who I am, or I've never done what I really want. So this is one of the ideas that we encounter in Buddhism, the idea that in our lives we betray ourselves by pursuing all the things that don't really matter to us at the expense of what really does. So that's a self-betrayal, because really it's only me that can say what's true for me and what isn't. No one else can. So if I don't say it, if I don't pick up on the fact that I'm impostering, probably no one else will. And if I do kind of pick up on the fact every now and again but ignore it, then I'm ignoring the awareness that could help me. So this notion of imposter syndrome is one example of something that collectively we never look at from both sides. We never look at the two possibilities of one being that the feeling that I have that I'm an imposter is a false feeling created by who knows what, brain chemicals going wrong, which is what we all do think, along with the other possibility, which is that it's right. It's got nothing to do with aberrant brain chemicals. So if we were going to be at all fair or scientific, we'd look at both possibilities, and we don't. So pretty clearly we're afraid of one of those possibilities. We're afraid of blowing the lid on one thing, which naturally enough tends to indicate that maybe there is some truth in it. Otherwise, why would we be so infinitely reluctant to examine it? Now, imposter syndrome is a great thing because it allows us to speak about it in this kind of a way. But the same holds good for self-doubt, obviously. Self-doubt's a terrible thing. We need to be confident, not self-doubting. Unless the self-doubt is true. Maybe I'm right to doubt myself. Maybe everything I say I believe I don't believe. Maybe everything I understand about myself isn't true. Maybe it's all coming from a false place. Maybe it isn't reliable. So this could be a helpful awareness. Self-doubt could be very helpful. Whereas confidence, as has often been noted, usually comes out of pure dumbness, really. We get to be confident by never questioning, by never being aware that there's a possibility of questioning. We charge ahead on whatever platform it is we've been provided with by our conditioning, by our society, by the thinking mind. So whatever half-baked notion of ourselves that we've been provided with, it's good enough. It's what I'm starting off with. I'm certainly never going to look back and question it and say, what is this? Because we're in a hurry to shoot forward, to run forward, and win the race on the basis of this identity that's being provided for us. And our society is very linear like this. It's very much like a race. It's very competitive. We've got to hurry. We've got to really kind of use every opportunity to develop the self, get skills for the self, acquire knowledge on the basis of this self, acquire social standing, acquire kudos, acquire a place in the world, the made up world that we've made up on the basis of everyone not questioning their idea of themselves. So it's a terrible race, and it's terrible because there's there's no time to stop and question it. You really haven't got time. If you do that, everyone else is going to pass you out. You'll be sitting there by the track. Everyone else is going to be shooting on ahead, and you'll never catch up with them. And that's a bad thing, so we're told. It isn't a bad thing, really, because even if we were just like them and we're up there with the leaders and we're running, and we're getting ahead of the pack and all that kind of thing, that's no good to anybody because it's all done on the basis of who we aren't. So that type of success is utterly meaningless. And not just is it utterly meaningless, but it'll turn against us. It'll become suffering in the future. Whereas if I opt out for a little while and look into myself and think about things and work out what I really want to do, I may never be catching up with all the rest. And I may never win the race, but it wasn't my race anyway. And it's not their race, it's not anyone's race, really. So that's self-doubt. And then performance anxiety. Performance anxiety is a little bit harder in a sense because it's not so easy to turn that around and ask, whose performance is it? So as Gurdjieff says, our two delusions are one that we can be and two that we can do. If I'm coming from the basis of who I'm not, of the construct of myself, then I can't be. The construct of myself cannot be because it has no being, because it's not true. Only that which is true can have being. So the construct, the self-construct, can have virtual being in a virtual world, can have virtual being in the mind-created virtual reality. And you can either do badly or do well within this virtual reality, but none of that's the same as being. And in the same way, unless I can be what I actually am, I can't do, because it's all false doing. It's all doing that issues from a false concept of myself, not that any concept could be the true concept. And so it's all very hollow, it's all very shaky. When we're completely unconscious, our purposeful doing doesn't seem hollow and shaky. It doesn't seem suspect at all. And so we don't experience any anxiety about it. But any consciousness at all coming into the picture, and there's a deep-rooted sense of doubt, and instead of self-doubt. It's doubt about whether I'm really doing or able to do what it is that I think I can do. So it's doubt with regard to whether I can successfully achieve my goals. And actually I can't, because they're not really anything to do with who I really am. Therefore they're not really they're not really my goals. So we can see that all of the stuff that there is on the internet and everywhere else, that's all about self-help and self-development and self-improvement. It's all a terrible joke, really. And the mental health industries are buying into that joke just as much as everyone else is. For the simple reason that we're not in the least bit philosophical or scientific. We're not looking at both possibilities. If I'm anxious, maybe that anxiety is telling me something true. If I have imposter syndrome, maybe that's telling me something true. If I'm crippled with self-doubt or low self-esteem, maybe that's telling me something true, painful as it is. If I'm depressed, maybe that's telling me something true. So if I ignore all of these things on the basis that they're due to abnormal behavior of brain chemicals or whatever the hell cockeyed theory it is that we're subscribing to, that's not a very good prognosis. It's a pretty grim picture. But if I give some respect to the process that I'm going through, and I realize that I'm an imposter, that's not such a bad thing at all, even though initially it may seem as if it's going to be. It's not such a bad thing at all, because it's really quite exciting. It's more exciting than any other crap that we might get up to. It's exciting because if I'm an imposter and everything I believe in about myself is false, then who the hell am I really? And that's kind of exciting to find out about. So thanks for watching.